has come to this, our final film selection of Sundance 2022. What's going on? Welcome to Victims and Villains. If you guys are new to Victims and Villains, we create content like what you're watching right now, simply to educate and engage individuals like yourself on mental health awareness and suicide prevention through pop culture. My name's Capt. Nostalgia. I have the privilege of being a writer, podcaster, and events coordinator here. If you guys would like more information about our nonprofit, podcasts, movie reviews like this, and most importantly, our mental health resource library, along with our social media and Patreon links, all of which you guys can find in the descriptions below. At the beginning of this video, I said that this was going to be our final film we're going to be talking about for Sundance. And yes, that is sadly true. This year had a lot of really great films that we got to talk about. And also, I just want to point out that we will keep an eye on our socials because we will also be sharing our thoughts on the top 5 short films from this festival as well. Without further ado, let's start talking about this one. It is called Piggy. I won't lie, this film was instantly my most anticipated movie of this year's lineup. And so if I come across a little bit biased, I apologize in advance. Also, because this is a Spanish film, I also apologize for any mispronunciations or incorrect grammar that may occur during this video. So Piggy takes place in a small rural town in Mexico where, much like other small towns, not a whole lot happens here. And so when a murder spree breaks out, a plus-size girl is left with the dilemma of telling the authorities about her bullies being abducted or living in silence. The writer and director of this film, Carlota Pereda, has actually taken this story and kind of expanded the world and really fleshed out these characters from her 2018 short of the same name, which you guys can find over on Alter's YouTube page. But if you guys haven't seen it, I'm going to link the description in the descriptions below. I'm also going to link that because that is a great teaser for what this movie holds. To be honest, I really enjoyed that short film, and so when I found out that they were making it into a feature-length film, I was really curious about what this film was going to entail and how it was going to kind of expand this world, because the short really stands well on its own. Like, it's pretty much a cut and dry film, but this film Pereda just absolutely knocked my socks off with this movie. And since I'm on the subject of Pereda, I will just start by talking about the script behind this movie. This movie deals with a lot of body shaming and bullying issues that I feel like not only make this a deeply profound film, but also one of the most important films that Sundance actually had to offer this year, or at least the ones that we covered. This is, out of all the ones we've covered, this is definitely the most important one. I think sometimes we kind of find ourselves as a country in America so progressive that, now we kind of accept all shapes and sizes when it comes to men and women. Body shaming has largely kind of dissipated from our culture as a whole. And that's not to say it doesn't still exist, but I think sometimes because of how progressive we view ourselves, we kind of fail to understand that these issues that we used to struggle with still go on, or still very rapid in other countries. It's one of the major reasons I love this film and was so just moved by it, is the fact that you kind of get a snapshot into another culture's standard of beauty, and kind of how this protagonist, a plus-size girl at the center of it, kind of deals with going up against those cultural norms, while also having to simultaneously wrestle with this moral dilemma at the core of the story. Pereda does a really great job as a writer, also to crafting a really rich but also intimate world, because it's a small town setting. Like, you feel the intimacy between these characters. Like, this is a neighborhood where everyone knows everyone's business, but yet you still have a lot of that lurking kind of taking place on the underground. Our protagonist at the center of the story, Sarah, Played brilliantly, by the way, by Lauren Galan, and I will have much more to say on her in just a few minutes. We really care for this character. I mean, the first act hasn't even finished yet by the time that you are already really just shedding your first tear, and that goes out to props to Pereda's direction and script, but also at the same time how Galan is actually able to bring this character to life. I think for so long as a culture and as a movie going society, we have craved stronger female characters. And when you look at characters that are the conventional types, whether you're talking, I would probably say most notably would be like Wonder Woman, Black Widow, uh, the Wasp, a lot of these female blockbuster characters that we are getting, when you look at them, they're traditionally all very slender, petite women. Pereda dares to push against that societal norm and says, no, our main protagonist that we're going to identify with and see a strong character is actually going to be this plus-size girl dealing with her day-to-day emotions and also kind of dealing with this huge burden, but also allowing you to empathize and sympathize with her character, her family, her culture, and just this entire world around her. This movie breaks so many rules because of that, but I will say that Sarah as a character, from where she starts to the very last frame of this movie, I think shows the depth of just strength that she really has and is able to overcome throughout the course of this 90 plus minute movie. I think so much of that comes from Galan. Galan is just able to just make this character and her performance feels otherworldly. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. Not only do you find yourself ultimately sympathizing so much with this character, you're heartbroken by so much of what she has to endure, whether it's school bullies or family or these cultural standards of beauty. And she just gives a gravity to this character that not only makes you sympathize with her, but also makes you root for her equally. And there's a part of you also that as she's kind of having this moral dilemma about whether or not she should let these girls who bully her die or live, you kind of can't help but, kind of be the devil on the shoulder and just be like, don't do it, girl. Don't do it. Pacing of this movie is immaculate. Never once does this movie drag. There's always a part of this movie that is constantly building up the narrative as a whole. Whether it's the scenes with Sarah's family or it's these moral dilemmas where she's having with other characters, and even the weird pseudo love story. I don't know how else to describe it. It's kind of weird, but you just kind of roll with it because it stays in tone with the rest of the picture. That's all I'm gonna say on that. I'm just gonna let it speak for itself, And with all of that floating around and pushing the narrative forward, this movie just moves a mile a minute, but it always feels like it has time to breathe, that it's never feeling rushed or it's never dragged. Cinematography is breathtaking. There are several shots in the course of this film that are just of like the landscapes, which I know you see a lot of movies do, but this movie, it just allows it to it envelops you within the culture. And I feel like that's another added touch that Pereda brings as a director. And when I say that this movie is immersive into this small town, but also a different specter of culture, those shots really help to emphasize both of those points. What this movie does too is the horror aspects of it really feel surprising. Like, yes, there are horrific stuff that we feel over and over again, but so much of this movie, the first two acts are almost a straight up drama that feel like it has more in line with something like Yellow Rose than it does something like The Conjuring or Scream. Honestly, that's what I liked most about this movie. I know I've said that a lot. It's true because you're getting those little bits of horror in in like tiny glimpses and you're building up the characters, it actually makes the horror that much more effective when we get to it in the third act. Third act is a doozy. Some of my favorite parts of the movie lie in this act. But Pereda makes you want it, and she makes you want to earn it. And that's really what I like about this movie, is I like that you have to earn the horror. It's not just given to you. And that really makes this story really rich. So not only is this movie currently my favorite film that I saw at this year's Sundance Film, but it has now set the bar for my favorite film of the year. So this video is a testament to anything that comes after it. And we'll see come December or this time next year if Piggy will remain my number one. A lot to love about this movie. Like I said, it's atmospheric, it's sympathetic, it's heartbreaking, it's intense, it's sad, it's immersive. Let's talk about Rorschach rating scale. So I'm going to go ahead, and I know that I've already given one of these for this festival and one already this year, but I'm going to go ahead and give this one a 5 out of 5. I feel like this one definitely deserves it. Just for everything that I've listed up above. I cannot wait to see this movie in a theater with people. I cannot wait later this year to introduce this to people. I've already started talking about it and pointing people to the short to go check it out if you can't see this at Sundance, because this movie, I know a lot of people are talking about some other movies. This is the movie that I feel like is deserving of the conversation. With that rating, let's go ahead and move on to mental health moment, because if I keep talking, this is going to turn into a podcast. Content mental health moment is where we take a theme of mental health and expand it in hopes to deconstruct the stigma around mental health for just a few moments. With a film that deals with body shaming and bullying, it's really easy to kind of gravitate towards those. But for those subjects in particular, I want to let the film speak for itself. I feel like Pereda does an amazing job at speaking volumes on those. But I want to speak on a very specific thing. And I'm not going to give any context, but there are several times throughout the course of this movie where Sarah, our protagonist, says these few words, and she says, "I can't do anything right." And I think that's something that a lot of us struggle with. And if we can't meet a certain standard of beauty, if we can't, or intelligence, or we can't get something at work, or something within our relationships, we just feel like failures, and we wear that failure as our own flesh. Much like Sarah throughout the course of this film, I want to speak to whoever's watching this right now and just hopes is saying that, again, you're not your failures. You're not your faults. You're not your depression. You're not your anxiety. You are not your suicidal tendencies. You're not your addiction. You're not your self-harm. You're not your self-hatred. You're not your self-loathing. The list just goes on and on and on. I don't know who needs to hear this, or I don't know when the last time you were told this, but you are beautiful and wonderfully made. Even if we are in toxic environments, we do not have to become those toxic products of those toxic environments. If we have a toxic work environment, leave the work environment. Toxic relationships, cut yourself off of those individuals. Family is a little bit more tricky. I know that a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about in this section of the video is, again, one of those things that are easier said than done, but I am coming from a place of an individual that has overcome that. This people that have, removing myself from toxic work environments, toxic friendships and relationships, and removing myself from situations that were bad for my mental health. And sometimes those took anywhere between months to years to actually come into focus, but also at the same time to remove myself completely. And it took a lot of recognizing the toxicity and the patterns of toxicity, while also having people from an outside stand, and then learning and saying how to take steps forward to kind of remove myself from those situations. And I've lost good people along the way, people that I genuinely cared about at one point in my life. But at the end of the day, like, I have to think about what's best for me and my mental health. At the end of the day, my own mental health is what is going to is something that I have to live with, but also at the same time, it's also going to be the very thing that I have to, that is also going to affect my other relationships outside of those toxic ones. And if you need a starting point, consider our mental health resource in the descriptions below. Again, I just want to reaffirm that you are not the worst thing that you've done. My challenge with you for you guys after watching this video is not only to wait for Piggy to come to either a streaming service or a video on demand or some sort of physical media. More importantly, it would be to look at the relationships and the environments that you expose yourself to and ask yourself, is this good for my mental health? And if it's not, what are the steps necessary that you're taking to cut yourself off from those people and or environments? You guys for checking out our coverage of this year's Sundance Film Festival 2022. As I said in the beginning of this video, I am going to be writing up a countdown of my top 5 favorite shorts from this year's selection. So make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button below. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, so that way you guys don't miss that. And we have a lot of cool things coming up for you guys as well. We're going to be doing, covering next month, actually next week, the Berlin Final Girls Film Festival. Had a couple titles to talk about with that one. Plus, February brings us Jackass, Studio 666, and more. So much. So make sure that you guys hit the subscribe button, because we're only getting started talking about the spookiest movies of this year. Have a good night, guys.